Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Bouché, and I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. I've been looking forward to this episode of the CP Pod for a little while for a couple reasons. One, great conversation here in a little bit with my friend and Canyon Pathways brother, Jake Blackburn. Really fun convo. Everything he touches is fun. Everything he touches becomes creative and fun and beautiful and high quality and amazing. And I'm really glad he's joined us for this. And I love every chance I get to be with Jake. But before that, we're going to dive into our field note for this episode. Our field notes here at Canyon Pathways are short essays that are located on our blog. And we read them here and sit with them on this platform. They're really explorations of an aspect of sonship, of living like a son. We keep teasing out this discovery. That's what this community is doing. We're exploring and discovering and finding what emerges as it relates to this journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship, living like a son of God among other sons, and then out of that, leading like a father. So that's what our field notes are. They're things we're discovering in the field, in this community, as we walk through this canyon, this valley of midlife leadership, growing as sons of God, discovering the freedom, discovering the joy, rediscovering the table that we are all welcome to as sons. And that's what these field notes are. They're an exploration of that. And out of them comes really cool discoveries. I love either landing or kind of usually stumbling upon a word or a phrase or a concept that is A, meaningful, but B, whoa, something's being revealed there, like a diamond. There's some new edge to this that's jumping out. Or I love when others send me words. Hey, Noel, check this word, man. Check this out. There's got to be something there as we dig into it. There's got to be something in this concept. That brings me delight. When guys do that, that's a joy for me, because words are my love language. I'm not just I wasn't just an English major. I wasn't just a law school grad. It is a deep love of mine, finding out what is in this language that we speak, because words are power. Language is power. God created the cosmos through words. He spoke into existence. He speaks blessings. He proclaims. And we know that in words, the words that we use, there is life and death, blessing and curse. And many of us have been touched by both the blessings and the curses of words that someone has spoken over us or into us. So that's what we're doing. We're looking at some aspect of what does it mean? And so here's our word in our field note today. It's change. Change. Interesting topic, because we are all dealing with it, and we're dealing with it especially in midlife, in leadership for one, and then in midlife leadership. Secondly, we're dealing with change all the time. We live in an ever-changing environment, as some people have said, many people have said throughout history. The only constant in life is change. It's a conundrum. The only constant is that there will be change, and we have to accept that. That's kind of how the change curve, as we kind of look at this from a management and leadership and social science perspective, that's how the change curve emerged. We realized, wow, this change curve maps really well over the grief process, over the various stages of grieving. And so, we're going to accept something that's new. We're going to test it. We're going to become disenchanted. We're going to walk through a valley of despair. Then we're going to find some small wins. We're going to find some things that are taking root, and we're ultimately going to come to a place of acceptance. And that's where we need to get to. And our goal as sons is to receive that, receive the reality of change, walk through the process, not alone and isolated, but with others, and embrace it, because healthy things grow, growing things change. That's something that has been very important in my life and leadership and journey over the years. I use that recently with a leader walking through a change process, a season of pretty dramatic changes, and it really was transformative for him. You've never heard that before. Healthy things grow, growing things change. And then some people would close out that loop or cycle by saying healthy things grow, growing things change, changing things are stretched, stretching things become healthy, and then healthy things grow, growing things change. So it becomes a cycle. And that's, when we can embrace that it's a cycle, that it's real, change is real. As mortals, change is real. As men in midlife, it's real. Our families are changing. Our bodies are changing. Our roles are changing. Relationships are changing. We live, as anyone who's served knows, in a VUCA environment. Things are always changing. They're always volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. When we can accept that, then we can move through it. And so that's what we're going to look at. Why change? Healthy things grow, growing things change. Some people would take that right away and say, well, yeah, but you know what? There's a corollary to that. There's another side to that, which is dying things change too. And that's accurate. If we let's just put it in a kind of botany context, if you have a plant, it's a healthy plant, it's going to grow. And when it's growing, it's going to change. It's going to look different. The goal is that it bears fruit, that it flowers. And a withering plant is also going to change. What's the difference? One bears fruit and the other doesn't. In the change, one is bearing fruit and another doesn't. It reminds me, I don't know, a decade ago, some time ago, I spent some time, I was traveling a lot, so I was really kind of more observant than I have been. I was traveling in the Mediterranean and just around in a lot of olive groves, and I was just really enjoying the olive trees and just the beauty. And I was in one olive grove, and I was kind of exploring it. The interesting thing that struck me was from a distance, you just see the olive trees. And I'm like, I wonder what season they're in. I wonder if they're producing fruit. I wonder if there's olives on those trees. And I kept walking into the grove and got closer. And even from 5 feet away, I couldn't really see what's going on there. And then I got right up there to these trees, got into the branches, poked my head in, looking around, and they were just bursting with olives. Bursting. I mean, the branches were weighted down, but I couldn't see them until I got right up close to them. And the thing that spoke to me through that is part of our job, determining where is their fruit and what is the fruit, what type of fruit is it. But to do that, you've got to slow down and you've got to investigate. And that investigation means getting close to it. You got to get into it. You got to get into that situation. Maybe it doesn't look like there's fruit. Maybe once you get into it, though, stop, pause, get a different perspective. There is fruit in that. Maybe in that relationship, doesn't feel like it's producing much fruit. Then you stop, pause, listen, observe, get into it. And it's bursting with fruit. That's growing. Maybe it's not ripe yet, but it's there. That's the change we're talking about. That's the change we're looking for. That's the change we have to be ready to address every day as mortals, as human beings, but now as sons of God. Sir, you living as a servant or a hired hand, change is difficult. It's like, hey, this is what I signed up for. I signed a contract. Here's what I do. Here's what you pay me. Done. But a son has to be, a son is expectant of what the father's doing. A son is looking for and ready for change because the son is doing what the father says and does, as Jesus told us. So let's get into the field note. Really like the way this came out. A couple discoveries. We'll kind of reflect on them here on the other side. But here's our field note on change. Change. I recently visited my hometown. As tends to be the case, some things had changed, some things had stayed the same. For example, the houses my wife and I grew up in. We drove by them both, viewing them from the street. Neither house had been part of our lives for about 25 years, as our families had relocated to different cities at roughly the same time. And whereas the house she lived in had many alterations, additions, upgrades, an entirely new facade, the house I spent over a decade of my youth in remained literally as it was. Not one window, roof shingle, porch swing different. Nay, not one detail altered. Even the landscaping and small exterior decorations seemed untouched, save by time. Both experiences filled me with nostalgia, but a different kind. To see a house you knew so well look so different made me remember with fondness the way things were, but it felt good to see something cared for, improved, built upon in creative and beautiful ways. Then, driving across town and observing the house I grew up in unchanged, just older, elicited a sort of sadness. No growth, No surprising upgrades, just wear and tear. No one had even bothered to replace the garage siding I had cracked with a basketball a quarter of a century earlier. Driving past it, I thought to myself, you have to work hard to not change something at all for over 2 decades, or you have to simply not care. I think the same might be true in our lives. Change creates an interesting dilemma for us. On the one hand, we naturally crave novelty. Research shows that a new experience, whether it's meeting someone, buying or renovating something, or exploring a new locale, lights up the pleasure center of the brain and creates a dopamine rush. Yet on the other hand, we're hardwired to resist change. Results from studies using MRI technology reveal that when we're shown new data being used to overcome our confirmation bias, to show that a fact doesn't confirm our position and thus we need to change our mind, our brains react as if we were in pain. This is a true conundrum. We need novelty and change to feel good. You might say we are made for discovery, but at the same time we experience pain as things change in and around us. It's why in the corporate context, whole consultancies with principles and processes have emerged to help lead organizations made up of people through change. How do we explain this? In short, our mortality. More specifically, the fear generated by the condition of being mortal, a condition we and our forebears have been afflicted with since the garden. Because we exist in bodies and environments subject to lack and decay, we are continually fighting the long defeat, a fight we are tempted to try to win through hoarding, grasping, resisting with clenched jaws and fists the tides of change flooding in. And it is a flood. To paraphrase a pre-Socratic philosopher, the only constant in this mortal life is change. We want control over that change. We roll against it as it operates in our surroundings, including against the people who populate those surroundings. Why? Perhaps it's just physics. Maybe it's Newton's law of inertia operating. It is us, like everything else in the universe, resisting in order to preserve our present state. But probably it's not just physics. It's fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what may be lost, fear of what we can't control. So we sit in the soiled diaper of emotional inertia because, as one leadership guru has put it, it smells, but it's warm and it's mine. Hence, we don't address our past wounds, we don't equip our kids, we stay in our job or leadership position too long, we fail to add spontaneity to our marriage, we won't forgive, we won't ask for forgiveness, we don't release control, we can't rest. This threatening nature of change seems inherent to the term itself. The English word comes to us from a Latin root meaning to barter. To change is like bartering with the future, exchanging known outcomes for hoped for but uncertain outcomes. And we're never sure if we're going to come out ahead. Will we see ROI from the variation? Will I see gains from this deal, this transaction with tomorrow? To change, it turns out, requires faith. Like the prodigal trusting that whatever happens, he'll have more food in his estranged father's presence, we must believe that on the other side is more health, more growth, more peace, more fullness. And it is the Son himself who fosters that faith. When we look to him, we see one who, though eternal, spiritual, non-carbon-based in essence, stepped into the flux of this age and changed. From infancy to adulthood, from Africa to Galilee, from two-parent to single-parent home, from carpenter to rabbi, from hero to goat, from mortal to transfigured, from dead to alive. And we are increased in our faith that, like him, through him, we too, as sons, can change. Indeed, that like all living things, we must change. And when we live like a son, not like an employee, not like a manager, not like a hired hand, we can begin to lead like a father in the midst of ever-changing environments and relationships. We can listen to others. We can cover those around us. We can negotiate and reason together with them. We can inspire. We can clarify vision when a new thing is happening. Then, like the river, we can experience the continual change of transformation, the effortless flow over obstacles on the journey from source to sea. And with a nod to Neo, we can live unafraid of change and begin. This change of plans greatly upset Jonah, and he became very angry. Jonah 4:1. There's our field note on change and really some good stuff. I mean, it really impacted me. in some profound ways as I've sat with this over time, both in life and in leadership, in circumstances and situations, scenarios, and relationships. The idea, just accepting the idea that change is the only constant, helps us embrace things. And it kind of harkens back to, we've already looked at in a previous episode, in another field note, expectations. And one of the takeaways from our exploration of expectations, which can so easily heavy laden us and bog us down because an expectation becomes this thing that we claim ownership of. It's things are going to go this way, they're going to look like this, and that person's going to do that, and this is going to happen. So expectations, and in that exploration, we discovered that that's what a servant, a hired hand, does, but a son who then leads like a father lets go of expectations and becomes expectant. We become expectant of what the Father's going to do. We become we step into this posture and this mode of operating that is expectant that change is going to happen, and that our plans are going to change, and that every plan is not going to survive first contact with reality, and so we become mobile and balanced instead of imbalanced when our expectations aren't met, which is change. And so this flows nicely into that, the idea that, hey, I got to accept things are going to change. And honestly, it's speaking to me today, really profoundly, because I'm in the midst of a lot of change in a circumstance. We had I'm in the middle of something happening personally and in relationships that necessitated a significant change of plans, involving travel, involving a lot of logistics, a lot of responsibilities. And as we're recording this podcast, I've spent about 36 hours where I thought the workload was going to be preparing for travel. Has now been the workload's been changing plans, changing reservations, reshuffling responsibilities, and at a significant level. And so this is speaking to me here as we sit with it. And I think the three things jump out at me through the field note. One was nostalgia, this idea of nostalgia. So I opened it up with this experience of going back to the hometown and having this wave of nostalgia that is, it can skew both positively and negatively. Obviously, nostalgia can warm our hearts, but as we look back and reflect, there can also be some sadness in it, as is, you know, this just occurs as mortals in this world. Little Tolkien quote for those of you that are interested, but there's a scene where Aragorn tells a tale to bring comfort to the hobbits, and he said, "It is a sad tale, as are all the tales of Middle-earth, but perhaps it will bring you some hope." And, I feel that way sometimes, that, there is a sadness. Even to our great joys, there's a sadness. Why? Because they won't last. But when we live as a son, lead like a father, we're expectant of what the Spirit's going to do next, the redemption that's going to happen, even as our joys are seemingly so fleeting in this life and the different seasons that we walk through. But nostalgia, it can warm us. That's the billions of dollars being spent on the nostalgia industry every year. It's why the Stones are still touring, because it brings us back to when we were young. Brings us back to those times that we now remember fondly, even though in the midst of them, they had their own uncertainties. The present is always full of uncertainties, of fears, anxieties, because we don't know how things are going to turn out. We don't know how this venture is going to go. We don't know how this relationship, this marriage, we don't know what's going to come upon our family, our children. And so, in the moment, there's uncertainty. But then we look back and it's the certainty of the past that does one of two things. We begin to look at it through rose-tinted glasses because we forget all the anxieties, or we can get stuck, obviously, in the wounds and the pains, the regrets that are there. But this nostalgia thing is real. I was just actually, reading about it this week, and it was jumping out at me that that's the thing. We look back at the past, and there's known outcomes now. No matter what the outcome was, whether it was a great one or a difficult one, it's known. We know what the outcome was. We know what the outcome was of that macro, circumstance, that market crash. We know what the outcome was of that relationship. We know what the outcome was of that decision. It gives us some certainty, and that can give us comfort. But it wasn't comfortable in the moment. And so that's one thing we got to remember in leadership, because we're getting thrown, all these things coming at us, and the change is coming at us. And we have to remember that the past looks certain, the present feels uncertain, but we're walking as a son. We're walking as a son of a good father who is making a way, who has already provided, who already knows, who's already set the path, who's already given the provision, who has already provided the manna, who's already given the pillar of smoke by day, the pillar of fire by night. We have to follow and believe, and it's easy to get stuck in that nostalgia. So we just have to recognize it and accept it. That's one takeaway for me. That one at the beginning of the field note that's important for us. The second one was this idea of inertia. That we can get stuck in inertia, and that's a human tendency. We might define it as the tendency to do nothing or to remain unchanged. That's a human thing. Until something happens that forces change, a lot of times in life, for most of us, most people, nothing's going to change until it has to. Nothing's going to change until something changes. Nothing's going to change until there's a crisis. And we see that, again, collectively as humans. Usually it is crisis that drives significant social, political, economic changes. And in our lives as well. It's usually something that was unforeseen and that's dire that drives change. Now, we can get ahead of it, but we have to be ready to identify when there's inertia in our life and identify what's keeping me here. What are the wounds? What are the fears? What are the anxieties? What are the outcomes, the negative outcomes I'm envisioning that are keeping me stuck here in my leadership role and in my life? And when we do that, and we bring other sons, other advisors, other people, other counselors around it, then we can get out ahead of it. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck. But of course, in physics, inertia, is it's it's a property of matter, of all matter, by which it continues in the existing state, either of rest or of some type of motion in a straight line until there's a change brought about by contact with an external force. And that's happening all around us. That's happening at the micro and macro levels, at the molecular and the cosmic levels. And that's just part of being an embodied being. We're dealing with matter here as well. We are natural as well as supernatural and experiencing the supernatural. So we got to recognize inertia for what it is and recognize when it's kind of weighing against us and let go of the control. That's the big one. We have field note coming on control. Control, literally from the Latin, contra rotulus. It's where we get the English word control. It means to roll against. So what it means is all these forces around us, we're rolling against it, holding on tight, trying to hold things together, trying to not change. That's the older sibling in Luke 15. He's holding the estate together. He's got this profligate, overly generous, foolish dad that he's looking at. He's got a prodigal son that's come back, that's wasted half the estate. And he's holding everything together so tightly. And he's angry and he's exhausted. And what's the response from the father? It's an invitation to the table. Come in, let go, let go. This is a change, and it's a good change. Why? Because it's something that was dead is now alive. Something that was lost is now found. This is a good change. Don't roll against it. There's fruit here. That second and third takeaway for me in the field note was just that God, our creator and redeemer, knows change. We serve a God who fills the heavens and the earth, who is spirit and is life. But God the Father sent God the Son down to do what? Become incarnate, to experience these forces that we experience as an embodied being, to live as a son, to taste change, to taste all the joys and all the pains, even to the point of dying. And he knows. Jesus came, became one like us, the first of many sons who now calls us friends. And he experienced all the changes that we saw in that field note, changes throughout life. He was not untouched by them. He felt them, grieved them, moved through them, was strengthened by joy, the joy of the Lord as he walked through it. So again, we have a high priest who can understand. So we're not isolated. We're not isolated in that because we can go to the Son who is an advocate for us, intercedes for us, and we have other sons around us. And when we form community, that's what the Canyon Pathways community is all about. It's a community of other sons who are experiencing the same thing in midlife leadership, moving from striving and grinding and exhaustion and anger to the rest and receiving of sonship. Why? So that we're filled. So that we're filled up, so that out of that overflow, we can lead others like fathers. That's what we're going for. So great discoveries that we have to accept change. Change is hard. There's a change curve. There's an initial shock, and then there's, a little bit of dismissal of it, and then you move down in all the frustrations, then through the valley of despair. Then you start to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and then we start to accept it. That happens in our life all the time. Everything that is a change, we're walking through that, whether it's a short one, there's traffic jam, we got to redirect, or whether it's a major change to our venture, to our enterprise, to our career, to our life, to our body, to our health, to our family, to our relationships. It's the same curve. It's the same process. And as sons of a Father who loves us, who walks with us through it, through the valley of the shadow of change, we experience joy and delight, even in the midst of it. That's what we're being invited into. All right, let's move into the conversation segment of the pod. We call it Sonship Stories. It's just a chance to sit down with and hear from other men, brothers around the world who are walking through the valley of midlife leadership, learning, growing, moving into living like a son and leading like a father. And in this case, we're talking to Jake Blackburn. Jake and I met a number of years ago, maybe 15 years ago now, and he's been a good friend for a long time. He and his wife and their child live outside of Jerusalem, but we met in the States. He's kind of a California kid, and I think we actually met in Ohio to begin with. But really been glad to walk with Jake through and in the Canyon Pathways community. He's the founder and creative strategist at Maroon Harpoon, which is a digital creation and optimization agency. He's got over 15 years of experience, product design, digital growth, creative direction, tech, data-driven insights, just super talented. One of these cats that just kind of can do anything and do whatever you need, and he does that professionally for clients around the world, but he's now a brother in the Canyon Pathways community, and so we had a little convo about that, and specifically about change, and we kicked off with this conversation with, I just asked him, like, how we talk about change, and how the Canyon Pathways community has helped you navigate the changes as you move through midlife leadership.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at the time when we started talking, and like realistically, at least doing the spiritual direction aspect of this whole journey was at a very pivotal point in my life, just with like chaos in job, new kid, things were just like, it was just a lot of new things all at once. And so
A lot of change all at
a lot
once.
of change all at once. That's for sure. For me, I would say that Canyon Pathways in general has helped me create stability and direction for myself, basically through conversation, being able to like communicate and talk with other guys, especially you. Like that's helped me be able to kind of focus things, because I was in a very like chaotic point where, you remember it was just like things were crazy at work, and I was just trying to figure stuff
That's all I
out,
heard
and
about
that
was how
was
crazy things were. Like, that's crazy, and that's crazy, and that's crazy. Well, let me jump in there on that point because it's interesting, and it goes to the field note discovery on change. That change both is a dopamine rush and at the same time, almost neurochemically, it like induces pain. So it induces pleasure. It's like hitting these pleasure and centers and pain centers. For you, that, and this is one thing we walked through in spiritual direction on a one-on-one basis, is, some of those things are natural for you. We learned, hey man, you're an ENFP and you're type 7 and you're futuristic oriented, you're creative naturally and professionally. And so I felt like that's where the tension was. It's like you're feeling like, oh, all these things excite me. At the same time, they're stretching me so much and it hurts a little bit.
yeah, definitely. It's funny because it's like I noticed, like I don't think I was at, you could say this for sure, I think during our conversation, but I see this now, especially, that I was not at my healthiest point during those conversations. And it was just like, I was just like chasing things here and there and trying to figure out what I was doing. And even my wife can attest to this in a lot of ways. Like after our conversations, I had like clarity on a lot more things. I also felt like I know this. I was seeking God on a much deeper level as well after that
Mhm.
for direction, for answers, for a lot of other things. And it's just
I mean, you were seeking him as a father in a new way versus a manager or a taskmaster.
yeah. I think that was an aspect of my walk with God that I hadn't really fully understood, and I'm still figuring out on a lot of different levels. I think that's going to be consistent across the board, but that's something that I was really working on after our conversations. Just trying to like do some journaling, think about how I view things, and like really figure that out. And I see a major difference in my walk even now as opposed to how it was before. So that it's a cool aspect of
Oh, it's amazing,
like
man, and
moving
people around you see
forward,
it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I see it. You're also I mean, it led to I mean, there's been a lot of, again, change, new things, and you were able to respond to them, like, you can speak to only we can really speak to where we were internally, and
Yeah.
some of that felt like unhealth, but even physically, your life's changed. I mean, you kinda I mean,
Yeah.
in the last year, I mean, you just made massive changes in your training and in, diet and just all those things, and you're in a completely new place there too. There's a almost for me, having walked through that season with you, that's almost like, an external manifestation of some fruit that was going on internally, as your heart and mind were being, renewed. But that's also part of who you are. It's interesting because, again, we know about, like, walking through spiritual direction. We know a lot about how you are fearfully and wonderfully made as a son of God. We know different things about your personality and your strengths and your disposition. And, your Canyon word, which is envision. What you do as a creative, you're always envisioning what could be and what could be improved and what could be beautified, what could be brought up and brought into the world. But envisioning something requires change, like, to go hand in hand. So how do you like, you're a creative professional, how do you think about that as we process this field note where it's like, man, change something new it could be audible, it could be visual, it could be experiential. Something new is both pleasurable but also can induce pain at the same time.
Yeah.
How do you take that?
From a personal level or from just like a general like
Yeah, personal, but also, like, I'm trying to be a better creative out of this conversation too, so, like, what help me do that. Help me you're an ENFP with a woo, man. You got help me lead people better into the change that lies in front of us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think I naturally chase change. Um as I think you've actually just basically said, but like it's it's something that I think that I thrive off of personally. Um like I tend to be the person that when I go work at a company or work with other people, I'm the guy asking like, well, why are we doing it this way? Let's create some other concepts. Let's build like this significant change. Or like, I've always been like the bad guy who's bringing change and play. Yeah, exactly. I'm the troublemaker. But I think
Change
like,
agent or troublemaker
yeah,
depending on the
exactly,
corporate culture that you're entering.
exactly. No, but I tend to be the change maker in a lot of cases. And I really think that that's something that is built into me, that like God basically has built into me in general, because that's the thing that people take the hardest. I think it's the hardest thing for people to do is to create change and move forward. And so it's like I tend to be the person that's just like, let's do this. Like, come on, guys. Like, we got ideas. Everybody's trying to do this. We're doing it for a long time. Why don't we just make it happen? Like, and I'll
Yeah.
help you build the
Yeah.
roadmap to get there. So,
Yeah. Well, that's the
so
unique part of you. Like, yeah, it's the let's freaking go. And some people have that, but then they don't have let me build the bridge or the cultivate the pathway or execute on this. And you bring both. It's amazing. It's amazing to watch. You feel like you're growing in that as a son and as you lead like a father in this season. And what's an example of that?
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there's I mean, as you said, like even just me having personal change with like physical aspect as well, like that is instilling in general, like you have the spiritual aspect, the mental aspect, like all these different parts of me that are consistently changing and progressing so that I can be better, a better father, a better husband, a better business person. Like across the board, it's giving me that confidence to do what I need to do. It's really interesting actually because I would say that there's I mean just in general, I've in my life I not only just being the agent of change, but also constant change happening consistently to me. Uh Negative, positive, all different levels, you know? And so I mean, I had significant change even after my dad passed away, you know? It was just like, I didn't know how to deal with that either. It was like, I just kind of internalized it and kept going. So, I think that's also something like as an ENFP or a 7, right, too, it's like for me, I'm change can also be hard for people like us in
Um,
essence because if it's negative change, what do? We tend to hide from that change. It's like we don't want
it's
to
gonna
confront it.
veer away and avoid this as
Exactly.
long as possible.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. We have this is interesting, on that point, we have another Canyon Pathways brother who wired very similar to you, and something that came up in his journey was spoken into him by someone a very wise person, and, anyway, this person, this advisor looked at him and said, "You know what? Here's the deal, man. You your wife does this differently. You both control, but here's what's going on. You control for fun. Other people control for other things. They might control for peace, they might control for order, whatever it is, but he said to him, You control for fun, and that sounds fun, and it looks fun, but it's control underneath." And that's something we might do. You know, when the heat's on, man, when the pressure's on, all of us our default, because of our nature, is going to try to control something or someone. Control. It looks more vicious for some people. It looks more, um, you know, harmless for other people. It might even be like, might be, "Yeah, it's great, man. It's like, alright, like, bring 'em in." But controlling for fun to avoid the hard stuff, and that has its own impact over time,
Yeah.
where
Yeah,
you're
for
burying
sure.
and you're repressing.
Yeah.
Well, how did the, um, retreat experience impact you in that way? Because one of the things we're trying to do is rest and then receive from other sons, and as you walk, you came to your first retreat was in Greece, and you experienced sitting just restfully in the Father's presence for 4 days among other sons. How did that help? What impact did that have?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was a very refreshing experience for me overall to be able to sit and connect with other guys who are going through other things in their lives, some the same, some different, and but just be able to like connect as as sons of the Father, and share with each other and have that openness, and also get to like have fun and everything else too. It was such a refreshing time for me. Um, like it's really often at like, I've been at plenty of other retreats and they don't always end up usually there's like a lot of teaching and you have a schedule and there's all this other stuff and it's just like it's really not I never feel like it's like feeding into me so much. It's just kind of like a connection time, you know. Obviously for me, I'm a 7. I'm just like, hey, let's go. I want to talk to everybody and like connect, you know. So it's that's how I am. Yeah, exactly. So I'm out there telling stories and like doing all this stuff and talking to people and so but this was actually like a time of like deep connection, both with other guys around me, the nice thing was it wasn't a lot of people. It was like a nice amount of people. Um, So you had that connection time with them. And then we also had that personal time of reflection on ourselves and everything that we're learning about ourselves during this time, actually getting to take the time to rest and listen and focus in on those things so that we can, at the end of that, go back and go back to our normal lives and feel refreshed, actually, and understand a little bit more about ourselves, and also take those connections with other guys that we meet and be able to continuously connect with them after that as well. And you can pray for each other. You have that. It's a community. You're building community, and that's the beautiful part of it. And that's what I love about it so much. Because I think, especially as men in this day and age, especially, I think I've said this many times, there's a huge lack of community for guys, to just have that time to talk to each other, to pray for each other, to outside of a church environment or congregational environment. It's not really in daily life a normal thing. So especially, I mean, I say that for me, maybe for other people it is, but from the other guys that I know, it's not. So for me, it was very refreshing and very encouraging. It was a wonderful time. And I mean, Greece is beautiful too, so you can't really go wrong with that.
The environment notwithstanding, it was a great job. So that your community part, I mean, the age we live in is only going to become more isolating. Like, this is a thing. We struggle with friendships in at least three ways. I mean, naturally, we kind of drift off some ways. That's kind of wired into us. Secondly, midlife does that for a lot of reasons. Your energy's going to possibly to a family, to leadership, and then even for the most extroverted of us, there is some pressure to preserve some energy units by being alone for a little bit when there's so many demands from customers, clients,
Sure.
leadership,
Yeah.
responsibilities. And then the age we live in, more and more isolating in a lot of ways. So we need that. There's going to be no shortage of this going forward to really cultivate and protect and invite and invest more fully, into other men and young men and men in midlife leadership going forward. The retreat built to do that, and you experienced it. But what I was going to say about the community part is that's exactly what we need when we're going through season of change is community. And yet we tend to kind of break it off and isolate, if not for no other reason, to just knock stuff out, just get the job done. You're like, no, I got no time for that because I got to do X, Y, and Z to execute, on this thing, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But when you said that about community, it reminded me in this conversation about Psalm 23. Being part of a flock, being led by a shepherd, in this case, the son. So being led by the son who's doing what he sees the father doing. He's leading us to a new place. It's change. The valley of shadow of death is change. And it's hard, and there's negative aspects to it. If it's a shadow of death, there's loss and grief. But even in that shepherding context, we're part of a flock. We're an individual among a community being led where? To a higher pasture, to a greener pasture, through a place that's got some ominous features about it. It's uncertain. Hey, we had grass back there. We did have water. It wasn't as cool and refreshing. And I hear that there's better water. I hear that there's greener pastures, but I haven't seen it yet, dude. So what? This is I'm not. I'm the pain center of my brain is being activated, not the pleasure center. But it's done communally, and I think that's part of our vision for the Canyon Pathways community. Like, hey, we're going to go through some valleys of shadow. Well, let's form this community right now. So you got this community. When you hit that next one, you have to go to the higher pasture to get to the greener grass. And you're doing it, man. That's part of what you are. I mean, hey, we're in Greece because of you. That was in the initial conversation. You had the heart of man film. You're like, dude, come do something here. We can go in the Negev and have guys. I got a group of guys. They're awesome men, brothers, former special forces. Like, they would love it, dude. And then I come back to you. I'm like, let's do it. And you're like go to Greece. It'd be better.
I mean, it was a great choice, honestly.
It was. There's some strategy, but more than anything, there's a distinctiveness that we're trying to cultivate in the CP community of following where the anointing is and where the purposes are. And that's living like a son. We're doing what the Father directs. We're looking to the Father. We're looking to the Father like the Son did. So here's questions. We'll wind this down. And this is interesting to me because you can share whatever you want with the physical journey, but you're in this place where, you initiated, hey, I gotta do some things physically, and you kind of dug deep. I got to develop this training. I got to, again, diet. We hit seasons like this in life where I got to reset here. And you've done that. You dropped a lot of weight. You've increased a lot of strength. How did you get through the change? That anything we do with our bodies is always going to have some kind of internal and spiritual application. So how did that process go? Like you said, I got to change. I'm going to do what and when? How does that work?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, for me, I really was, the thing that like set things off really was that I needed that change in my life because it was also like being a dad. I have, 2.5-year-old. So it's like, I'm chasing him around and stuff. And there's the physical aspect of feeling exhausted, but then there's also the spiritual part of it, which is feeling exhausted as well, because I'm carrying all this weight on my shoulders, which essentially was affecting my physical side as well. Stuff from my past, after my dad passing, everything, just like dealing with all these things and trying to like hold I was holding it in instead of letting it out, and just kind of like, or just building my strength in multiple levels in order to grow, in order to be able to carry the things that I need to carry, especially as a son and a father, so like in my whole aspect of life, it's, there's so many things. And you've said this, it's just like all these things tend to weigh you down. And so for me, I obviously took to like the physical aspect and really worked on that. But at the same time, I think in the diligence of those workouts and dieting and everything else, I also created diligence in other aspects on the spiritual side. So like reading, journaling, praying, all these different things that are feeding into me on a spiritual level, not just the physical side of things. So I think it's strengthening myself in multiple levels so that I can not only have that release of all the other things, but also be able to carry what I need to carry and not keep all these other things on my back.
Mm-hmm. Here's how I hear that. How do I need to live in a newer, different way right now as a son so I can lead and carry like a father in some other areas? And you did it. What was a point? What was the most difficult point, or a difficult point where you had to bring someone into it, where you needed a little bit of help? Because we always do need that, and all of us need it in different ways. You're highly extroverted, so high extrovert that affects your personal life, relationships, needs, and then how you interact with the world. Where'd you reach out for some help? Where'd you get some aid? Where'd you get some encouragement in that process?
Yeah. I've got some other, first of all, my wife, who's been super supportive in this. It is thin already, so doesn't need to really worry about any of this stuff. But like on that side, I also, it's connection with, other guys that I know around me, trying to have more connection on that level, conversation. This other guys that are also part of the community. I talk to them for the spiritual stuff. And then I have other friends like here that, that when I need some like motivation, like I go to them, or I'm like, I have another buddy who's a bodybuilder who came to the gym with me, and like we did a whole workout and he taught me some new stuff, and it was great, so there's that too. But
So everyone needs a bodybuilder in their life.
yeah, but I really think that it's funny because a lot of these things, I think the way that I'm built when it becomes these very like weight loss, dieting, all the spiritual aspect. It's obviously a very personal thing. It's like it affects you. So I have a tendency of trying to do all these things on my own as well. So it's just like I don't like to ask for help too often, but I've learned to know when I need to. And I think that's the thing that matters right now in this journey, is like being able to say, I need help, especially as a man. Like that's a thing that we fail at consistently. It's such a difficult thing for us to do, is to like, we just like keep throwing stuff on our back and keep going and going and going. And then at one point we're like halfway on the ground trying to like, we're like, oh, okay, I'm going to make it. And then you're not really going to make it, or you're like close. And then you just need that. You say like, in our case, especially as a son, right? It's like, Father, help me. And then he'll pick you up and lead you along. Well, that's like the beautiful thing about it, that as believers, that's an amazing thing.
Great conversation with Jake. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And I just loved how he said, ultimately the question became, do I need change? How do I change? How do I address change? How do I need to live in a newer and different way right now as a son, so I can lead and carry like a father? I thought that was brilliant, because it's obviously the journey we're on here in the CP community. And I'm working with a lot of leaders right now who, it's an interesting thing. Like, we initiate change sometimes as a leader, we cast vision, and then you get into it, you get into the implementation, into the execution, and it's going to get hard, and it will get hard. And it gets hard for us as leaders because we're leading and everyone's going through the change curve in a different way. So everyone's a little shocked by this change that's happening, and then kind of dismissive of it, and then frustrated when, the rubber really meets the road on change. And then you go through the valley of despair. You're just despondent. And we do that as leaders. We're like, here's the vision. And then you got to walk through the valley of the shadow at certain points, whether that is in your life, whether that's in your venture, leading a team through it, whether that's helping, guiding, shepherding your family through it. You're going to go through those phases. So we have to embrace it. And that's, Jake is just encouraging us in like, hey, I need people around me to do this. I can't do this on my own. And we can, when we do, we feel like, hey, I'm going to throw it on my back and just work harder, put my head down, like Jake was saying. That's when we fall into the isolation. That's when we become the older sibling in Luke 15 who's out in the field. Where is he found? Hey, he's out doing his job. He's dutiful. He's making it happen. He's working. He's grinding. He's doing what he should. But guess where he's not? He's not receiving the invitation. He's not celebrating. He's not ready for a change that brings life from the dead. That when something is found that was lost, something that was unexpected, and everyone's celebrating, he's angry and exhausted. And that's what happens when we get isolated. So that's why we're here. That's why we're in the Canyon Pathways community, walking on this pathway together as we live like sons and lead like fathers. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Share it with people in your network. Subscribe so you don't miss episodes in the future. Also, check out the show notes. We've got links and also a PDF with reflection questions. So you can use that personally in your own devotional life, or you can use that in group gatherings if you want to play the episode as a resource and then walk through those short questions as we continue through this journey of developing a language of sonship and gather stories from men in midlife leadership around the world. So thanks to the whole team who made this episode possible, worked hard on it. Thanks to all of our donors who are supporting us, making the Canyon Pathways community possible. And thanks to you for joining us, for being with us, walking with us as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.